I read nothing that anyone had ever written about what actually chemo does to the soul, or does to the mind, or does to, does to your day. And it really is debilitating and extraordinary. And people have been through it. I can see why people have been through it don't want to talk about it.
Yeah.
They want to forget about it and get on with their lives if they can.
Welcome to Ireland Unfiltered. This week's guest is one of Ireland's great writers, Colm Tóibín. Colm was a journalist, has been a journalist, novelist. He's got a play opening in the Gate on October 31st, Pale Sister, with the great Lisa Dwan. And he is one of the most entertaining talkers in Irish life. It was an honour to have him in the studio. We talked about his book, Mad, Bad, Dangerous to Know, which is just out in paperback, about the fathers of Oscar Wilde, James Joyce and W.B. Yeats. We talked about Brexit, the border. There was an awful lot that we could have talked about, because Colm is one of the great chroniclers of Ireland as well, through his journalism and through his fiction. So it was really great to have him in the studio. Before we go to that interview, don't forget to subscribe to Ireland Unfiltered on all the usual channels. And if you like the show, please leave a review. Colm, welcome to Ireland Unfiltered.
Thank you.
So the first question, really, given what you've gone through in the last while, is just how are you?
I'm good.
Yeah?
I'm in good shape. I feel good. The funny thing about cancer is it's sneaky. So how you feel has got nothing to do with it. It's what the test says.
Yeah.
But the tests are okay at the moment, but you can't judge.
No.
But I feel good.
And how often are you having tests?
You have a CT scan every 3 months and a blood every 6 weeks.
Okay.
You do that for 2 years, I think.
Yeah. But how long was the treatment itself? That is the thing.
You lose 6 months, you know, really from July to July to Christmas. You're sort of nobody, really, and you do nothing, and you learn nothing, and you're pretty miserable, really.
And how was that misery? Because it must have been pain.
It was psychological. You can't sleep, really, because you're on too many steroids. You can't eat because you have no taste and no appetite. You can't listen to music because it sounds like confusion. Whatever's going on in your mind just won't take music. You won't take music, you know. And you can't read because you can't concentrate. So think about that. And therefore you can do absolutely nothing. And even the news on the radio becomes irritating, and so you have to turn that off. And you can't really walk.
Right.
So trying to get to the kitchen, or trying to get upstairs, so you just lie on the sofa. And what you do is what I started to do was think, I'm going to get through the next 5 minutes.
Right.
And then I'll consider my position. And then do that again and do that again. I found the hospital comforting because of all the activity and people coming and going, and the fact you were just another patient. There were people worse than you. It's like, people say about Lourdes. But a hospital is the same. An oncology ward is the same, where people are worse than you. And so,
because your prognosis was always, you were told it was curable. So
that the aim would be to do that, and which means that it was a sort of tough regime of chemo, incredibly good care, really good care, nothing to complain about. But I read nothing that anyone had ever written about what actually chemo does to the soul, or does to the mind, or does to does to your day. And it really is debilitating and extraordinary, and people have been through it. I can see why people have been through it don't want to talk about it.
Yeah.
They want to forget about it and get on with their lives if they can.
Yeah. Because my father went through it, and they tried to cure his cancer with it, and it didn't work. And the treatment was so brutal.
Yeah.
And I don't know how, if you don't feel it's going to work. Yeah. The absolute pointlessness of what you're enduring must be hard.
Yeah, but people make those decisions.
Yeah. But the fact that you knew that they had a chance of working must have been the thing that kept you going.
Yeah, that certainly made a difference. And I just put up with it. I think, like everyone does, I just lay on the sofa and time went by. It went by very slowly. And then when it was all over, it seemed a long time ago, and you sort of forgot about a lot of it. But I think the word I would use would be anguish. That it wasn't just a passive, that you couldn't do things. It was an active agent, which I would call anguish, which overcame you and was there really all the time.
And now you just have to, you feel good now and you just have to...
Yeah, I was driving down to Wexford the other day and it was beautiful twilight and there was nice music on the car and I was, there was no traffic on the road and it was going to be a beautiful day the next day and I thought, this is okay. Yeah. This is okay.
And how quickly did that come back? Because you say
Slowly.
You didn't really...
It came back, so I went back to work, which I probably shouldn't have done, but I felt if I did, that I would be able to draw a line. And even though getting up in the morning was hard, and even though I had problems, I still have slight problems, but I had real problems then walking down a stairs. Whatever had happened to the muscles in my legs, going down a stairs. So I had to get a personal trainer for a while because I had to learn I had to create muscles or systems whereby I could do that. You put me standing on a ball, and try to go around without falling off and stuff, and getting up on a bicycle. And I'd never been in a gym before. I suppose it arose because I thought I should do something just to get muscles going. So I went into the Olympic swimming pool at Columbia University. And it was great because there's a space for old professors away from the Olympic swimmers. And so I was just going up and down like a dog, up and down slowly. And I realized that I didn't have the power to get out of the pool, even though it was perfectly easy. There were little slots for your feet, and then a piece of metal that round bars you pull. You just get yourself up. Anyone could do it without thinking. Didn't have the power, and that's when I decided I really needed to do something urgent about building up muscles and all that sort of stuff. And I do it on my own. There was no point in calling the oncologist to complain because the oncologist's job is to deal with much larger questions to do with how much chemo for how long, that sort of, and what are the side effects. But the side effects on small things like muscles are really quite serious.
And when you went back to work then, did that help a lot?
I told no one. You see, and I published a piece eventually, but not until the semester was almost over. So the students didn't know, and my colleagues didn't know.
Did anybody know?
No. And so that one of my colleagues did. So that just made things easier because I just came in, did my work, and nobody thought it was anything strange. And I learned to behave like a normal human being. I did my suffering on my own.
And why didn't you tell anyone?
I just thought if I didn't tell anyone, I might actually move out of it and people would stop looking at me saying, "Are you all right today?" That I would just be all right today.
Did it feel lonelier not telling anyone?
No. It actually was I thought it was a really good trick because it made me, just behave in the classroom, like a normal person and just get the whole thing and put it behind me. So gradually then, as January, February, March, and really in March I played a game of tennis. Okay. I didn't win or anything, but I played it.
And that must mean that felt good.
Yeah, it did, yeah.
Your book, Mad, Bad, Dangerous to Know, is just out in paperback now. And it's a wonderful book about, the fathers of Wilde, Yeats and Joyce. But there's also a brilliant introduction, which is a story of kind of, these men and Dublin and the streets and your own memories. And you end it with saying, some city streets are haunted. And you've taken us through your own recollections of walking from Lombard Street along Westland Row and Merrion Square. And I found it, that haunted sense and like the people you mentioned, and you mentioned Tony Cronin and people like that. But I wonder about your memory because you've talked a lot about it. And was it ever a curse?
No. I think that if you look at something like Westland Row, and if you were an outsider, it's a pretty rundown street. Half of it is owned by Trinity College, and most of those doors are in fact blind. They're just that they don't open into anything. So one half of it is sort of gone. In a way, it's dead space. And the other side is really pretty run down. There's a car hire place that's falling apart. And you could think it was nothing. But then when you start digging, you realize, oh my God, this is where, Joyce's father and Joyce's grandmother actually lived for a certain time. This is where really important scenes in Ulysses happen, and indeed in Dubliners. This is where the Royal Irish Academy, the Royal Academy of Music is. The Wilds were on the corner, And of course, the Yeatses were all around too. So it's, I mean, Oscar Wilde was actually born in Westland Road. That's what the family house was. And you realise there's a sort of density, a sort of texture that builds in Dublin, in certain parts of Dublin, that is really extraordinary when you think about it. But then other days you don't think about it.
But there's even some, you remember being in the National Library and hearing the bomb on South Leinster Street going off.
Yeah, and remember, I think anyone who was in Dublin that evening remembers it because there were car bombs, and therefore you didn't know how, and there had been two, so you didn't know if there were more planned for the evening, and therefore as you're walking up Kildare Street, there are cars parked everywhere. You're looking at every car, and you're trying to work out, is this the one? As I approach it, will it? And you're trying to get in somewhere, but there's no public transport anymore, and so it's a Friday evening, and. I remember, trying to get the phone in Toner's pub so I could bring home to say I was here. But I couldn't get any further than the Toner's pub, and everyone just huddled in the pub listening to the radio.
Yeah.
And I mean, eventually I walked all the way back out to Belfield, where I was staying just beside the university.
Okay.
But you don't forget things like that.
Talk to me about those three men, because there's something, would you say they were all sort of characters in the Dublin sense of the word, slightly pejorative sense of the word? Yeah,
they were larger than life, and they had independent minds, and they did whatever they pleased, and you could apply, that the fact that they were Yeats and especially Sir William Wilde were Anglo-Irish. They were the English in Ireland, except they had lost a great deal of their Englishness, and. They were a ruling class, but they didn't feel like that to them. They were living in a city that had no parliament. But both John Butler Yeats and William Wilde, they really were sort of nationalists. They were seeing an Ireland of the future in which people like them would not hold power. But the case of John Stanislaus Joyce is different. He inherited 6 houses in Cork, which gave very good rent. He had a nice job as a rate collector in Dublin. He really was very comfortably off. Well, he just drank the thing solid. I mean, in other words, he mortgaged the houses, remortgaged them, eventually sold them, lost his job, was on a pension that paid, I think, 1/3 of what his job had paid him. And he was in his early 40s, and so that was the sort of end of his working life. So he would wait every month until the check came in, and instead of feeding his family or doing all the things he might have done, he went out immediately on the rampage. The interesting part here is that when his son James Joyce has to write all this story, he could easily have written 3 books of great resentment against his father about what a horrible fellow he was, and a spendthrift and a drunk and and instead. He begins to examine what happened when his father went out. How come he was so popular? Where did he go and what did he say? And of course, he made him in Ulysses, into a great wit and a great singer and a figure about town. Obviously, his family is starving at home. But I think Joyce's way of forgiving his father or seeing his father in a whole new light offered him a sort of opening for his novel, a way of opening its form or opening the emotion in the book. Which gives it its sort of plenitude and its largeness.
Did he say something like Ulysses was the image of him or something like that?
I did. You see, all the characters in Ulysses, except Stephen, are really of Joyce's father's generation. It's his father's world of those pubs, those long days and betting horses and sitting around talking rubbish. That was all his father, and not him. He's the Stephen figure. He's the child in the book almost. And the sort of the terms used, the attitude towards life, the wit, the singing, all of that is Joyce's father's world.
And you end the book with I never know how to pronounce that poem. You end the book with the Joyce poem. How do you pronounce it?
Ecce Pur.
Ecce Pur. And that is a beautiful ending to it.
That it's when his grandson was born. James Joyce, and it was the same time as his father had died. I just wrote this very beautiful, stanza, rhymed poem about, and he says at the end, Father, forgive your son.
And like that struck me because, there are fathers who you might think would be looking for, maybe today they would be looking for forgiveness from their sons, because as you touched on there, they all had an element of the sort of man about town about them. And do you think that then transmitted a sort of a seriousness onto their sons?
I do.
As well?
I do. I think that all three, but especially Joyce and Yeats, became great finishers.
Yeah.
Yeats's stanza endings, Yeats's sense of control over his material, Yeats's constant production, and in the same way, Joyce's interest in perfection, in working for years on the same project with utter determination and seriousness. And yes, I suppose also in the case of Wilde, Oscar Wilde, of also making sure that what he did sort of mattered in a way that what his father did could sort of fade. So yeah, all three sons became great producers, and all three fathers had a certain elements of real laziness in them. I mean, Sir William Wilde is slightly different because he was a doctor and he actually worked.
Yeah. But you said yourself then that you saw your discipline being a central part of how you work. You said it's a question of finishing everything you start. It's as simple as that.
Yeah, I mean, I think that one of the problems with a novel is that you find something out you didn't know as you start the book, but then you see the whole book. And there's no real reason for you personally to write it, in that you know it. It's called work, and you realize what you're doing is a form of communication rather than, say, self-exploration or some sort of auto-psychotherapy, that it is actually done for somebody else to read rather than for you to be satisfied with. So it's called work, and you've got to do it.
But is the self-exploration part of it as well?
I don't really think so. I mean, you're always thinking of the reader. As you write a scene, you think, how much does the reader need to know? Do I need to add one more thing so that clarity is absolute? But you're not working for yourself in that sense, because you know what you need to know. You're making something that someone else can use. So when a book's finished, it really has nothing to do with you. It's just gone. It belongs to whoever might want to read it.
And it doesn't help you.
I don't think so. No.
Because you said, when you talked about Nora Webster, you said that about, writing about that, time in your life, and that there was, you said there was no obvious grief, just blackness when that happened, when you went to school.
Yeah, I think that I was trying to explore the silences that come, especially for children, around loss and grief.
But I was looking for the actual. The line you had about writers who have described grief and loss must know things are never as simple as that. That you would feel a sense of relief when it was over.
Yeah, that in other words, I suppose the emotions there are so complex, and one comes like a wave, and the next one doesn't, and you don't know when you're going to feel okay or when it's going to be difficult again. And I was trying to register that in a novel, trying to just work out what that would feel like over a few years from the perspective of someone who's lost her husband.
Talk to me about that time, because I was struck reading this book about and there's lots. You may say this, it's not about self-exploration, but there are themes, and and you've talked about the death of your father when you were 12, what that grief does for what you feel that grief does for you as a person, as a writer. Because I remember Tony Cronin saying to my father about my brother, who was 13 when our mother died, and he said, he had this line, he said, if tragedy happens to you early enough, it'll make a man out of you.
Yes, W.H. Auden said something like that. He was asked, how to make a writer, and he said, as much neurosis as the child can take. And it's a lovely idea that somehow or other, that shock to your entire system, where nothing again is ever taken for granted, and where there are no words to describe things, where many things have to be relegated to silence simply because a sentence about them would be untrue. And so you hold things in, you keep things back. And that eventually has to make its way. In other words, it's like blocking a stream. The water will go somewhere, and eventually makes its way into a sort of funny creativity.
What do you mean when you say anything you say about them would be untrue?
I mean that, you could say, how do you feel just now? And the feelings are so jumbled and so unstable that you couldn't describe a single one because another one would come in its place. So that language isn't the thing. That silence seems much more appropriate. And then, of course, you start to fill the silence.
But silence was the thing that you remember from that time.
Yeah.
It was the only thing that it was how things were explained, was
really,
it? Or only not
if
explained?
somebody dies in a house full of children, you can't really talk about it every day. You've got to create an atmosphere of normality for various things to happen, including people to go to school or study or just meals to be served and you can't really start every day on about it again. And since you can't do that, then that means you go silent. And it means that certain things that maybe should be said are not being said. And everybody pretends to be normal. But there's nothing normal. And the distance between what people are feeling and what people are saying is very interesting. It's one of the things that a novel can cover better than maybe drama or cinema, where you can show what someone is saying. You can even show what someone is thinking. You can also show what someone is feeling.
Yeah.
And so you can work with the drama of between those things, the sort of conflicts between silence and utterance.
And do you find yourself looking back and wondering about, because you said that until you didn't learn to read until you were quite old, I think 9 or 10, and your parents thought you were just no good.
Stupid, yeah.
And do you find yourself wondering about how your father would have received what you did?
I think it's more that my father died in 1967. Now, if you look at what happens afterwards to Fianna Fáil, my father was a member of Fianna Fáil, to the Catholic Church, my father was involved in many ways with the Catholic Church, that those arguments really were, I think, necessary between father and son, in the sort of 20 years between, after that. I didn't get to have them, so that was a pity. I sort of missed out on that.
And did you feel you had them by proxy?
No, you just don't have them. You just miss them.
And because you said about the Heather Blazing, you're talking about setting it up for the Redmond character. You would have sacrificed my mother so my father could have lived longer, so I killed her off.
Well, that's just looking at, in that book, I got rid of all my siblings, which is quite a common thing for a writer to do. And so just me, just a figure like me, a father, and the mother is dead. So yes, I did. I was able to, with some intensity. So your earlier question is probably right, that I did work out a proxy way of communicating with my father, which was via that novel, The Heather Blazing.
Yeah. And you never thought, you only saw it in terms of what was happening to Ireland. But I suppose not only in terms, but like so much of your work and so much of your life has been the sort of the entwining of the personal and the political. And maybe it wasn't just politics.
The novel before is mainly set in Spain, the south, and the novel after, the Story of the Night, is mainly set in Argentina. And so this novel is everything I knew about what was happening in Ireland.
Yeah.
I had been editor of McGill magazine, and I wrote a history of the Supreme Court for the magazine. And that meant that I had access to all the judges, or the ones who would see me. The cranky ones wouldn't see me, but some of the liberal ones were very nice, including some very conservative judges who, when you met them in their chambers, could not have been more charming and in a way more knowledgeable and helpful. So I saw people I disagreed with in a social way, in a social setting. And I found all that very interesting. And I put a lot of that into the book. And I put a lot into the book also about Fianna Fáil and about what Fianna Fáil meant to a certain generation as well.
And how do you feel about how Ireland has moved on in that era, in that sense of liberalisation? Because it's hard for people today to imagine the Ireland you're talking about.
You see, it's hard for people today to imagine then, but it was hard then to imagine now, and much harder indeed. In other words, that the things that were really holding up the society, its full stability depended on a knowledge that Fianna Fáil would generally win elections and would generally hold power, and that the Catholic Church on the other side would also be filled with people on a Sunday and would own the schools and would control a great amount of what happened in private life. Well, these things fell apart. And And, it wasn't as though they were replaced by the most dreadful, people continued to look after their children and be kind to one another. And I suppose that there is sometimes you do feel, I'm probably alone in this, but it was the poet Paul Durcan who mentioned it first. Sunday shopping, you wonder about it, how quickly it was let happen and how sort of odd it is. There's another great frenzy on a Sunday to go into town and wander around all those shopping centres with bags. You wonder if this is entirely necessary. I don't suggest that people stay home like they used to and sort of sit there. But
do you think any of those rituals are like? What about sort of drinking on Good Friday? That seemed to. There was also something amusing about the lens people would go to drink.
When you're young, that Good Friday thing, if you happen to be with friends and you suddenly realise you've completely run out of drink, it's like 8 o'clock in the evening, and the supermarkets are covered like statues or something, all the drink, and no one will sell you any drink, and the pubs are completely closed. You think, what are we doing in this country? Why are we here? But when you're older, you just think, well, why don't those kids shut up about this? It's not a big problem.
And you don't drink anymore?
No.
Why is that?
After I had chemotherapy, I just never went back on it. It wasn't advice from the doctors. They don't get involved in those sort of small things, but I just never went back on it.
Okay.
And I'll go on for as long as I can with that now.
Really? You don't miss it?
Yeah, you do. If you're eating pasta, you'd love a glass of red wine. That's about it. But just don't have it. Just have something else. Drink ginger ale or something.
Right. Your first book, Bad Blood, when you walked along the border, it ends extraordinarily. And I went to Bestbrook this week, and we'd arranged to talk to a couple of people. And as we were there, as we were waiting to meet we were meeting a unionist politician there, and I was with the journalist Peter Oborne, and a man started walking along in the street walking his dog. And we said, we'll go and just ask this man, can we talk to him about Brexit and the border? And we walked over to him, and it was Alan Black.
Oh, how is he?
He's okay.
Oh, good. I'm glad to hear that.
But he is the last person you talked to in Bad Blood, and he brought you into his house.
Yeah.
But I read that book again this week, and it's extraordinary because of what is happening now. And the fact that I actually met Alan Black this week as well. But just to say, he was the only survivor of the Kingsmill massacre.
I think of all the things that happened, Kingsmill is probably really, really the worst, where you feel the sectarian thing was at its nastiest. And that these men were coming home from work, and there was one Catholic, the rest were Protestants. They were in a minibus.
Yeah,
and they thought it was the one Catholic the paramilitaries were after. But it wasn't, it was them. And the one Catholic survived, and Alan Black was the only one from the Protestants to survive. And
you talked to the two of them?
I tried to speak to the Catholic man who was I just didn't, he really, really didn't want to talk. And he didn't want a journalist coming to his door. And Alan Black was the same, except he just said, come in, I'll show you a video about it. I don't want to talk about it. And then, of course, we ended up watching the video together. And then, of course, he did talk, and I found him a very kind, thoughtful, interesting man. I mean, not just because he survived, but he was just, there was no reason at all for him to let me in that day. And he just thought, I don't want to just send this guy away. And then, of course, he was charming and interesting.
Like when you talk about Ireland and how it's hard to imagine Ireland today from then, like when you walked along the border and when you see what the border is now, like how hard was it to imagine, a land without checkpoints and what it is today back then?
I think you knew from Irish history that the thing in the north was going to end. That the political parties, if you think of Ireland during the Civil War, who could imagine De Valera taking over in 1932? And so that all of the parties, so many of the parties, Irish parties, had come out of a period of violence. Even, for example, official Sinn Féin, eventually make its way into the Labour Party. Yeah. And people who were in official Sinn Féin becoming government ministers without any problems. I mean, something like Prodigious de Rossa becoming a sort of great Democrat. And So it was clear it was going to end, but it was unclear how or when. The problem seemed intractable. Certainly, you look at something like Kingsmill, and you think that happened in 1976. You think surely then, when that happened, everyone should have said, "This is enough. This must stop. We cannot go on with this." But everyone had another 20 years left in them of that sort of energy, because Kingsmill, people were killed in retaliation for that.
Yeah.
Everything was retaliation. So it became a spiral of violence.
And of
people
justification.
and sometimes, even a funeral or wouldn't even be covered by, say, Irish television, just because there were so many, and people just didn't, it wasn't news anymore.
And how do you view the situation today then?
It's I love Cash for Ash because it's a normal political scandal.
Right.
It's normal political incompetence, and it's the best thing ever happened in the North, because it just makes politicians just normally bad at what they do. And of course, there was a very funny moment when the DUP held power at the beginning, where I think there's a newspaper called Süddeutsche. Anyway, it's a South German daily newspaper. It's got a huge readership. Called me up and said, "Could you write us a piece explaining to Germans who the DUP is?" And really trying to explain Gregory Campbell and Sammy Wilson and Ian Paisley and their sort of inside outside, that they're still feeling somehow or other that they're left out of everything.
Yeah.
And yet they're right in the middle of things, and the sort of rhetoric and the fact that they represent, the way in which they have just wiped out the official unionists eventually. So I described all this to the South Germans.
And just what do they make of them?
Well, writing it down, you realise how oddly comic it seems in any European system to have a party that is almost quasi-religious, or certainly has a messianic sound to it, that somehow that they will not join this ghastly little free state with its sort of Pope-led schools and its sort of corruption, little mean corruptions.
Yeah. And the broader sense then, because I was... you wrote a review for of Roy Foster's book in '93, and one of the lines you talked about, described yourself as a revisionist, but also with still some of the old atavistic urges. Now it seems to me at the moment a lot of the atavistic urges are being kind of poked again in the population at large because of what's happening with Brexit.
I think they're happening in England. I think a lot of the things that Irish people got really head up about, English people are now getting head up about, such as sovereignty, such as our independence, such as our nearest neighbour being our biggest enemy.
Yeah.
And so you're hearing all that from across the water, which is really odd, because you thought they were meant to be rational, hard-headed, and we were meant to be sort of soft-hearted and sort of childlike and prone to violence. And well, look who's all emotional.
Now.
Look who's all emotional now.
Yeah.
I mean, look at Simon Coveney and Leo Varadkar, two most rational people. I mean, they look good, they sound rational, they put thought into what they're saying, and there isn't an ounce of emotion in either of them. And you go across the water and they're all mad. How did that happen?
But we're in a situation today where we're talking about being starved of, there won't be any food. We'll run out of food in a couple of days, and they're in Britain. They're talking about running out of liquid eggs, whatever they are, and it's kind of it's surreal, as you say. It entered a surreal stage of.
Yeah, I remember when there was was there big storms on the Irish Sea, were unusual, and you went in. I remember going into Marks and Spencer's downtown, down in off Grafton Street, and there was a big signs up in the food hall downstairs saying that the entire yogurt or some whole area was nothing, and obviously all the fresh stuff wasn't there either. And so that's we're in Ireland, and we don't. I mean, strange, because of globalization, because of the EU in certain ways. I mean, most of the food we eat is processed elsewhere, and even most of the fresh food we eat is made elsewhere. So that's the way globalization has gone. That's what the EU has given us, and therefore we're vulnerable now.
But do you think what is this sustainable? This kind of this relationship that we currently, although you talk about Coveney and Varadkar being the rational ones.
Yeats's father said democracy has a way of correcting itself, which is true. But it's also, I think, capitalism has a way of finding it's so persistent and it's so good at what it does that there's no chance within a very short time things are not going to be for sale. That the commodity, the whole idea, if the society ran out of commodities, the commodities would be replaced very, very quickly with other commodities. So this may last a few days,
right,
and for certain commodities, a few weeks.
Yeah.
But after that, the supermarket stands will be absolutely packed with things. I can guarantee you.
I'll take that guarantee to when I go looking for my eggs. But are you concerned about the other side of it, that atavistic? I know it's happening in Britain, but there is a tension, and
I'm concerned because I feel privileged to be a citizen of a country that's a member of the European Union. I think the European Union is one of the greatest political inventions in history, the most unlikely one, and one which is, I think, is progressive. And is concerned with people's welfare. I mean, it isn't there to control, although there are elements of that. But that it isn't there to create barriers to control. It's there to open up barriers and to allow certain freedoms, including indeed the freedom for capital to move between countries freely, but also for people to do so. And it's if you can benefit from it, in other words, it really, the whole way education works, or if you've got a job, for example, the holidays you get courtesy of the European Union, there's so many things we get courtesy of the European Union that we've almost forgotten about it as being the thing that I think really has lifted our lives.
And Britain forgot about it completely.
I think it's appalling that you can see how, however, that they think, well, we want our parliament. Because this is a very old thing for them. I mean, it goes back very far. The idea of their parliament controlling their lives and with no arbitrary authority, which is the whole business of what Protestants in the North really care about. The idea of the Pope being an arbitrary authority. Well, the European Commission has some elements of being an arbitrary authority. In other words, can you vote for it? If you don't like it, can you vote it out of office? Well, no. So it represents a sort of arbitrary authority. So it can be seen in a society that has long hated popishness and papery and popes, and that the European Union has a function or is an entity that cannot be controlled by the electorate in the same way as Parliament can. So you can see where the British are coming from, and it might have been helpful if the European Union just became more concerned at how we see it. And it began to market itself in a way that it doesn't at the moment. And also, am I alone in thinking that the European Parliament is a sort of alibi for democracy? That it looks like a duck, walks like one, but it sure ain't at Parliament. In other words, I can't find it, that it matters in the same way as the European Commission matters.
But do you think that's part of why it's endured and been able to do the things it's done? Because it doesn't have a PR system. They're not going to lose their seats by 3 votes.
Because it's progressive. It's got away with murder. It really is intent on making the lives of citizens of Europe actually better, and therefore it can manage the fact that we can't vote it out.
But that's what people attack it for as well.
Yeah, I mean, it's very hard to see that if Donald Tusk ran for election, that he would win.
But do you see now, having, when you look at what's happening in Britain, you look at Trump, there does seem to be a sense of fracture and a sense of populism and people.
I think Hungary is the most disappointing one. I was there for a long time in 1990, 1991. And it certainly looked to me as though it was just going to open up. It was going to become a model society. It was going to, have every type of human right and build up its, infrastructure. And I don't know where this thing came from. that's caused Orbán to flourish in such a way. And it isn't as though they're having any immigration. No one in their right mind would migrate to Hungary when you could migrate to Germany. I mean, why would you? And so Islam is not a problem for them. Emigration is not a problem for them. They're inventing these problems so that out of those 40 years or whatever number of years, more than 40 years when they didn't have democracy, that poisoned the society in some way, so they don't have a sort of unbroken democratic traditions, but they do have a large intelligentsia. I mean, a serious thinkers in the society. And I know there is a distinction to be made between what happens in Budapest and what happens in the countryside. And the countryside, of course, is much more conservative and paranoid than the city is. But Hungary is an incredible disappointment. And I mean, it's very hard to know what the European Union should do about it, because on the one hand, it is breaking every rule in its, for example, relationship to a free judiciary and to general freedom of the press. But if you expel it, things don't get any better. But if you keep it in, it sort of has a way of corroding the principles which I think hold up the European Union. So it's worrying, and also couldn't have been predicted.
And what do you make of that syndrome where, somewhere like that, or even in places in Britain or America where they fear immigration, even though it tends to be the places where they have the least...
the very funny thing about England is they really handled immigrants from Pakistan, India, and the Caribbean really well, and integrated. People became integrated, and people are becoming, the next generation are becoming, doctors and scientists and are going to run the country. I mean, 2 of them are in cabinet at the moment.
Yeah.
But when people started to come who had not been under them in the empire, they got all offended. It was when the Poles, the Bulgarians, and the Romanians arrived. English started to get upset that they were in hospital beside them in the bed, whereas they never minded when someone Indian was beside them in the bed. And I think that's sort of funny that they do somehow or other the empire, the family sort of has got into somehow their unconscious that they're part of this great family.
But this was a reminder that they'd lost the empire.
The Lithuanians are just not part of this. I find that odd.
When you were ill, did you think a lot about death?
No, I didn't know. I was too busy feeling sorry for myself, and I was just feeling too bad. And I was also like, what you think about, and I bet you I'm not alone in this, is food. That when you get your taste back, I'm going to eat a big lobster. Or I'm going to really start marinating. I've never marinated anything in my life. I'm going to start marinating steak. And you would just ponder. And I started to ponder on a thing that why would you ponder on? Lemon juice.
Okay.
I thought I'd really like to drink a lot of lemon juice. You see, I had no taste at all.
Right, yeah.
And thought lemon juice, the taste of lemon, and the taste of lobster, and the taste of marinated steak. So I thought about that a lot. So this was a much more pressing business than death. Do
you think about it in general much?
No.
No?
No. Do you think I should?
No, I don't. I just wondering. I think about it. I don't know. Some people think about it a lot. Some people don't.
I'm sort of busy.
Yeah. But he doesn't. You're not of that. You're not of a sort of morbid turn of mind.
I put it into the books. Okay. Because it must be on my mind somewhere. Yeah. But I have a way of avoiding things that are unpleasant, just by thinking about something else.
Does it concern you when you get sort of reaction to your comments like about, crime fiction and things like that? Does that? No.
Not at all.
No.
That was all on Twitter. See, I don't have Twitter.
Yeah.
So it's just out in the ether, it's out in the air somewhere.
And people don't tell you about it. They don't.
Oh yeah, everyone tells you about it. Hold on, everyone tells you about it.
And you don't watch television at all?
I thought I'd like to watch the news last night just to see. But I discovered the television doesn't work, which I did think it didn't, but there was one in the corner. But I tried everything,
and you couldn't.
But I haven't watched it for so long.
Really?
Yeah.
And so you don't watch the news?
I listen to the news on the radio.
Okay. And in the end of October, Pale Sister is opening at the gate. Can you tell us about that?
I did a thing with Lisa Dwan at Columbia where we taught a seminar together called the Antigone Project. As part of that seminar, I agreed that I would write a version of Antigone to be narrated by her sister Ismene. She doesn't really get to speak much in the play. It's the Pale Sister. Antigone is the fiery one, the one who makes decisions. Ismene is the one who doesn't want any strife, So I wrote it and I worked on it quite intensely with Lisa. I would send her a scene. She would record it and Dropbox it back to me. I would listen to it. We would just discuss it at some length. So finally, it's going on. It's a monologue, and it's very intense. And I've seen her perform it, and it's an astonishing performance. I mean, she really has she can get a sort of level of intensity into what she does. That sort of, I think, matches the text. And so it's opening in the gate. I think the first preview is the 31st of October. So instead of watching Brexit, no deal Brexit, the end of yogurt as we know it, arriving on your supermarket, you can come to the gate and watch Lisa Dwan in a play that I think is the most performed play in the world now. People do versions of it everywhere. Okay. And it's more than 2,000 years old, so it's stood the test of time.
Colm, it's been an honour having you here today.
Thank you very much, Dion. Thank you.
Great to have Colm Tóibín in the studio today. Before we go, don't forget to subscribe to Ireland Unfiltered on all the usual channels. And if you like the show, please leave a review.